In this lesson, we are going to be working on adding and subtracting fractions and also remembering what fractions are. So let's start with reminding ourselves what fractions are. So remember, a fraction is simply comparing parts to a whole. The part is the numerator, the top number of the fraction, the bottom number of the fraction is called the denominator. And remember that the denominator is the whole. So how many parts are in the whole? And the top number is telling us how many parts we are concerned with. So for example, when we have the fraction 4/6, the whole figure, whether rectangle, circle, etc., is divided into 6 pieces, but we only have 4 of them being shaded. So that's the part that is the numerator. This is called parts or fair shares. The whole is how many fair shares we've divided our figure into, and the 4 is the shaded parts. In the next example, we're going to practice adding fractions, and in order to add fractions together, they must be the exact same size piece in order to add. In other words, our fair shares must be the same, which is the denominator, and then we can add the numerators together or subtract the numerators. So if we are adding 2 parts and 1 part, we would have 3 parts out of the fair shares or the whole, which is the 4. So remember, the rule is we add or subtract the numerators, but the denominator stays the same. In the next one, 4 plus 3 is 7. We add the numerators, but the denominator stays the same. In the next one, we subtract 3 minus 1, which is 2, but the denominator, the fair shares or the whole, stays the same. In the next one, we add the numerators together. The denominator stays the same. And if you remember, 3 over 3, 3 parts over the whole would equal 1. What if we have different parts, a different denominator? We have to make a common denominator. In other words, we need to take the whole and divide it into the exact same size pieces. So if we have a whole and we only are concerned with half of it, we could take that half and divide it into 6 pieces that are 6. And if I only want half of them, I would have 3 out of 6. And if we have 1/3 of a box or a candy bar, I want to divide that into pieces that are 6. I would have 2/6. Now we have our common denominator, so we can add them together and we would have 5/6. Add the numerators, the denominator stays the same. That's finding the common denominator. In other words, dividing the whole into equal size pieces. So what do we do if the denominators are different? So let's start with the second example. First thing I want to do, and I find it the easiest, is to write our fractions up and down, which is vertically. We need to figure out what size pieces we could divide our whole into so they'd be the same. In other words, we want to find the least common multiple. So if I were to count by 5s and count by 4s, the first number that we would come into contact with that's the same would be the number 20. For 5 to get to 20, I'd have to multiply by 4. And if I multiply the top by bottom by 4, I multiply the top by 4. To get a denominator of 20, I would multiply the bottom by 5, and then I have to multiply the top by 5. So in the top example, 5 times 4 is 20, and 2 times 4 is 8. In the bottom example, 4 times 5 is 20, and 5 times 1 is 5. So when we add the two together, 8 plus 5 is 13, but remember we keep the denominator, which is the whole, and that is our common fair shares. Now in the rest of these examples, what we want to do is first write the fractions up and down vertically and decide what are we going to multiply by to get the common denominator. If I count by 2's and I count by 4's, the first number they have in common is 4. Well, this was already 3/4, so I don't have to change it at all, which means I don't have to multiply. To get our denominator of 4, we get 2 times 2, which is 4, and if I multiply the bottom by 2, I multiply the top by 2. So now when I subtract, 3 minus 2 is 1, and we keep our denominator, which is our fair shares or our whole. Write the next example up and down vertically. Decide what are we going to multiply by, so times blank equals blank. If I count by 3's and I count by 9's, my first time they would be the same as 9. So I don't have to change my bottom at all. But on the top, I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 3 to get 6/9. So if I subtract the two, 6 minus 1 is 5, and we keep the bottom number, the denominator, the same, which is our whole. Let's do the next one. 5/6 plus 1/9 times blank equals blank. If I count by 6's and I count by 9's, the first time they would be in common would be 18. What number times 6 is 18? That's 3. And if I multiply the bottom by that number, I have to multiply the top by that number. 1/9, I would multiply 2 times 9 to get 18. And if I multiply the bottom by 2, I multiply the top by 2. So when we're adding those together, 15 plus 2 is 17 over our whole, which is 18. 17/18. So what we'd like you to do is to try the next few on your own, and then when we get together, we will check to make sure that you understood how to add and subtract fractions.